All right, good morning, everybody. It's Monday. No, it's not Monday. I forgot we had a holiday over the weekend. So this is Tuesday. So we'll get to be running a best of next week on this show. So Monday's show will be a rerun again. But anyway, this is Tuesday morning. So if you got a car question, pick up that phone, dial 850-763-0555. Monday through Friday, with the exception of holidays, we try to answer your automotive questions and try to point you in the right direction on things that maybe you can do yourself. Now, some things you can do yourself. Some things like changing a wiper blade. Now, I know some people out there have a hard time changing wiper blades, and I can agree sometimes they can be a pain to change. The biggest thing I can tell you is just be careful and don't take the wiper blade off and let the arm bang against the windshield, because in a lot of cases you can crack your windshield, and that gets rather expensive if you have to pay for it out of your pocket. Now, if you have full coverage insurance or comprehensive insurance, they will take care of that at no deductible, just in case you do that. But one of the things we do try to talk about is how you can do things, well, that keep your car safe. I have a lot of people out there, and we see it all the time, that have lights that are out, tail lights that are out. That's something you can do relatively easy once a week. Walk around your car and have someone turn the turn signals on, hit the brake lights, put it in reverse, make sure all your lights are working. I don't know very many people that do that once a week, but I know at James Auto Center, every time a car comes in for an oil change, we do that. We look at your lights. We're going to make sure all your lights work. And matter of fact, something that a lot of people, I don't think they ever get checked out or don't get checked out unless they go for front end alignment, is have their tie rods or ball joints checked. Or their suspension checked. Every time a car comes into James Auto Center for an oil change, we're doing a 30,000 mile inspection. Yeah, it takes a little bit longer. You cannot do an oil change and a 30,000 mile inspection in 10 minutes or 20 minutes. It takes about 30 to 45 minutes with two people going through it, one starting in the back, one starting in the front, working together, and you can get an inspection done on a vehicle correctly. But what we look for is ball joints and tie rod ends. Ball joints, a lot of people don't even bother checking ball joints because, well, then they don't wear out like they used to with McPherson strut suspensions. I'm going to preface that. If you have a front wheel drive car and you have McPherson strut, ball joints aren't a big problem like they used to be on a type car that had upper and lower control arms, which had load bearing ball joints, such as that type system, like in trucks and older model bigger cars, and those type vehicles had ball joints, load bearing ball joints that would wear out in about 50 to 70,000 miles. And we were seeing some Ford trucks coming in at 36 and 40,000 miles after about 5 years with wore out ball joints, because you cannot grease them. They're non-serviceable. You cannot put grease. They're greased at the factory when they're put together, and that's it. And the next time you grease them is when you replace them and put new ball joints in that are greasable. But that's something that needs to be checked. I recommend checking every time we do an oil change, which is every 6,000 miles, we're checking the suspension. We're making sure there's no tie rods loose or ball joints. In order to check a ball joint, you have to take the weight off the ball joint. You do. You have to, if it's a lower control arm and an upper control arm like on a bigger car, you just put the jack close to the ball joint as you possibly can, pick the tire off the ground, and see if you can pick the tire up and down and have any movement. Any noticeable movement, any noticeable up and down movement or side to side, means there's a problem with the ball joint. You're not allowed to have any movement. You might get away with maybe 60 thousandths of an inch, but 60 thousandths, if you can notice it, it's too much. If you can't feel it or can't see it, it's okay. But if you feel it, if you can actually feel the clunk, 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 yeah, it's too much play. That needs to be taken care of. Now, tie rods are something that a lot of people think they're checking when they go get an oil change. They'll pick the car up, the tires are hanging down, the tech will go out there and spin the tires. He'll grab a hold of a tire and shake it. If he doesn't feel any play, he says there's nothing wrong with your tie rods. But that's not how you check a tie rod in. If you pick one up and it's hanging down, your tie rods are now in a binded position. They're bound up because they're now at an angle. You have to jack them up where they're almost straight. That way you can see if you have any play in the socket. Too many shops, not trying to be mean or nothing. I'm not trying to be mean to them. They just don't know that's the correct way to. They pick one up. They say there's no play in it, and there's no play in it when you do it like that because it's puts it into a bind. If you would jack it up like I talked about by putting the lower control arm close to the ball joint as possible, pick it up, and when you finish checking the ball joint, grab it side to side and see if you have any play. If there's any noticeable play that you can feel looseness in there, usually it's an inner tie rod or an outer tie rod if it is. You know, now that's if you got a rack and pinion system. Now, not everyone has a rack and pinion, but just about most cars and trucks today do. But those that don't have, it's what we call recirculating ball. You have a pitman arm and an idler arm and drag link or center link. And those need to be checked as well. They need, you know, a lot of those have grease fittings on that style. But I shouldn't say a lot of them. A lot of those have gone away too. The grease fittings, there's no grease fittings on those. So those need to be checked more often than you think, because that's what affects your toe in. Your toe in is what makes your car go down the, you know, I have a lot of people say, when I go down the road, it seems like my car follows the road. It wants to go this way and that way. That means your tires are toed out. Instead of them being toed in slightly, when you go down the road, they open up straight. That's why you set them slightly toed in so the road pulls them open. So if you set them in at an 1/8 of an inch toed in, approximately, or 2 or 3 millimeters toed in, when they go down the road, they'll go to 0. They'll be straight. But what ends up happening, if you got play, they end up toeing out. So now you're going, the car wants to follow the road. And so your car seems a little squirrely, as it says. And that's one of the symptoms to look for if you have an alignment issue that a lot of people, well, I guess they just don't realize it has to do with alignment. But if you feel a vibration, I've had people say, well, I got a vibration, I must be in alignment. No, that's your tires out of balance. But that can be accomplished. Your tires can be knocked out of balance because you're wearing the rubber off because the alignment's off. So if your tires are vibrating, if you feel a vibration at 55, 60 miles an hour, somewhere in that area, that's tires out of balance, and that could be because the alignment's off, chewing your tires up. So there's a lot more involved in front end alignments and setting toe ends and caster and camber. And a lot of cars, you can't set the caster and camber on. The caster is what makes the car go down the road straight. You know, it makes it, how am I trying to compensate for road curvature. You have it where it will actually make the car want to slightly pull to the left to overcome the curvature of the road to the right. So there's a little bit more involved in setting. You got caster, you got camber, and you have toe in. Caster is the inclination, the kingpin inclination. If you could figure out the top of the tire, there's a tire in the middle right here. This is the top ball joint, that's the bottom ball joint. Positive caster is towards you, the driver. Negative caster is away from the driver. So you want to have, your caster has to be very, very close to each other. Caster does not affect tire wear. Caster affects the way the car pulls left or pulls right. Toe in can make them do that too. If you have one that's towed out or not towed right, your car can pull to the left and follow the road, pull left or pull right. But one thing that doesn't cause pulling but does cause tire wear, along with setting your toe, having your toe out can cause tire wear, is your camber. That's the top of the tire. You know, if you're looking, this is the front edge of your tire, this is the bottom edge of your tire, your upper ball joint, your lower ball joint. If the tire is leaning out, that's positive caster away from the car. If it's leaning in towards the top, towards the car, that's negative caster. What we like to have is just slight positive caster. That way when you sit in it, the tires go back to 0. So when you're not in the car, the tires are slightly leaned out, and as you sit in the car goes down, it comes back to normal. See, all this is taking into account a car that's got a load in it, especially a driver. So your settings on alignments have to do with someone in the front seat. We're taking into consideration someone's in the front seat, someone's driving. We know it's going to be a little lower on the side, maybe 1/4 of an inch if that, and the car is going to drive, you know, going down the road straight or going to pull left or pull right. So there's a lot more involved in doing alignments and just making sure that everything's within specifications. We've talked about this with Hanson before, how the rear end you make sure everything, the rear end is lined up first. If the rear end's not straight, or you've been in an accident, or there's an alignment issue in the rear end, the car is going to go down the road what we call dog tracking or dog legging, crooked. You can see all 4 wheels. You see the front wheels, you can see the back wheels. We've all seen that. And we go, why is that car doing that, or that truck doing that? Maybe the car was in a wreck. Maybe someone set the front end and didn't pay attention to where the back end is. I see that quite often. People will, nothing wrong with the car, it wasn't in a wreck, but they just set the front end and didn't bother to set the rear end. Make sure that the front end's lined up to the thrust, the rear. That's how you do it. If whether you have a rear-wheel drive or a front-wheel drive car, the rear tires are what's called the thrust. And the front tires they follow along the rear. So you've got to make sure your rear is as a line straight, and from there then you do your front tires, you do your front. And that's where you make sure there's nothing loose, no ball joints, no tie rod ends, no bushings. All those have to be tight. If you have any play whatsoever in your front end, tie rod ends, ball joints, your alignment's going to be off. You're going to wear the inside or the outside of your tire. It's going to track wrong. It's not going to steer right. You're going to wear your tires out faster, and you're not going to have the control and that you need in a vehicle at high speeds. I mean, I see this all the time. I see people going down the road 70, 80 miles an hour with tires bouncing because they're so badly out of balance, because the shocks are gone or they're not there, or the tire is cupped because they didn't rotate them. There's so many things that people overlook that can be done just by doing a little preventive maintenance. If you would take 30 minutes a month to walk around your car or truck or whatever and look at the tires, check the air pressure, check the lights, check the ball joints, check the things that need to be checked. Now, that's 30 minutes a month. That's not a long time. You know, check your transmission fluid, check your coolant level. You check your coolant level while the car is completely cold before you. That's the first things you check when the car is cold. You check your coolant level, because that way no one gets burned. You make sure your reservoir bottle's full, and you make sure your radiator's full. Take the top off and look at them. Also, make sure your antifreeze is not more than 2 years old. I know a lot of people out there say, my antifreeze looks green or blue or red or whatever the color may be. There's nothing wrong with it. If it's more than 2 years old, it's time to get rid of it and exchange it. It's not me saying that. Society of Automotive Engineers has decided, hey, if you let your antifreeze stay in there more than 30 to 40,000 miles or 2 years, you're not saving money, you're costing yourself money. So antifreeze needs to be changed on a regular basis. Brake fluid the same way. It needs to be changed on a regular basis. Too many people don't. Then they wonder why they have master cylinders leaking or wheel cylinders leaking or calipers seizing up on them, or having to change their brake shoes or brake pads more often because the calipers are frozen. There's so much that people overlook, and now they're treating symptoms. They're putting pads on there over 20,000 miles because the calipers keep pushing in, but won't ever back off because the O-rings have gotten rock hard inside there. You know, the square cut O-rings that hold the piston in there and allow it to retract ever so slightly. Things like that we overlook, and we wonder why we're spending so much money and keep doing the same things over and over again. Well, when you're doing a brake job, or you're doing an alignment, or you're doing anything maintenance-wise, you've got to make sure you do it right. Just doing it halfway is an open invitation to more headaches down the road and more money that you don't really need to spend. Make sure, and recap, we got a few seconds here. Make sure your front end's tight. Make sure all your lights are working. Check your fluids when they're cold, your oil and your antifreeze. Check your transmission fluid after it's at operating temperature. It doesn't do any good to check it when it's cold. You have to have it operating temperature while it's running. You don't check, the only other fluids you check when the car is hot. The only fluid that you check when the car is hot is the transmission fluid. All the other fluids get checked while the car is cold. Antifreeze, differential transfer case, engine oil, brake fluid, all that gets checked while the car is cold. The only fluid that gets checked while hot will be the transmission fluid. That's the only one. Hey, this is James Morris. Give us a call at 850-763-0555. We'll be right back on after these commercial messages.
If you want the best deal in town for tires, you need to call Baytown Tires at 873-8900.
Hanson and the guys at Baytown Tires take pride in serving Panama City for over 20 years. Baytown Tires on Highway 98 in St. Andrews. All service work backed by a nationwide warranty.
Water is too powerful to fight alone. Mr. Router Plumbing. Sink, shower, and toilet emergency drain services.
Fall is here. Kids are in school. Holidays are around the corner. Time to visit friends and family. Give us a call, 850-763-0555 for your free AAA safety inspection.
Part of what I'd like to let you know is what we do and how we work our system. Basically, we've got about 700 stocking dealers scattered around the 15 counties here in the Big Bend area of the state. I run a fleet of trucks, vans, and what we call hotshot vehicles to deliver to our dealers quickly so they can help service you as fast and efficiently as they can. Provide timely and efficient service, and we're there to take care of our dealers, who in turn can take care of their customers.
All All right, we talked about fluids you check when hot. My wife said, well, what about transmission fluids you can't check out there? And I went, they don't have a dipstick. Well, yeah, they can't hear you, babe. But yeah, that's right, because they don't have a dipstick. That is exactly, some cars don't have dipsticks. They really don't. General Motors, I remember them coming out a few years ago, and people would say, well, there's no dipstick in some of these vehicles. Well, you have to have them at operating temperature on a flat lift, either on a drive-on pit where you can go underneath it, or put it on a drive-on lift, a four-wheel drive-on lift where the car is flat and level, and you remove a plug with the car at operating temperature, and you see if the fluid just trickles out, just drips out. If the fluid just drips out, it's fine. That's the right level. If you take the plug out at operating temperature and nothing drips out, then it's low. You need to add some to it, but always add the right fluid. That's where a lot of people mess up. Years ago, when I was first one in this industry, we had Type F and Dexron. That was it. I mean, we had two transmission fluids. That was Type F and Dexron. Well, I can tell you right now, the Ford has at least 4, maybe more. How many you say, Anna Marie? 7?
I believe it's 7 now.
Up to 7 transmission fluids for Ford. And on Toyota, I know they got at least 2, maybe 3 on Toyota.
I know of 2 in Toyota.
Yeah.
Honda is very specific.
Yes, extremely. Do never, ever, ever mix fluids with Honda. It's got to be Honda fluid. Nothing goes in Honda but Honda fluid. Don't buy it from any place else. Don't buy it from any parts store. It has to be Honda fluid.
Yeah, now some of your Hyundais are very specific and expensive as well.
Yes, you're right about Hyundais. Hyundais and Kia, Hyundais are pretty much the same family, but the fluids are interchangeable. But some of these are not exactly inexpensive. Some of them are high dollar. But the most important thing is you check transmission fluid when it's hot. That's the fluid you check when it's hot. And if you have a dipstick, it's easy. But if you don't have a dipstick, not so easy. You have to get underneath the vehicle. If you do not have a dipstick that you can inspect your transmission fluid, it needs to be inspected when the car is hot at operating temperature. That way you know where the fluid level is, because transmission fluid expands, and we want to make sure it's at the right level. We don't want it overfilled, and we don't want it underfilled.
Now you were talking about a plug that you remove. So where do you put the fluid in? You put the fluid in that plug?
No. There's a plug. Now, it depends. Like if General Motors, you have a vent, you have a place to add on top of the transmission. You have a plug that has no dipstick in it. You would think there'd be a dipstick there, but there's not. You unscrew that black plug, and you add fluid there until you see it start dripping out. That's on the General Motors. Now,
it drips out the same hole?
It drips out the hole that you pulled out to inspect.
Gotcha.
That's how you top one of those off. But say you've got a Ford, or say you've got a Ford that has a plug that's inside the transmission pan. What it is, you've got a recess. Imagine your pan, flat pan. You've got a plug that goes up, and it's got a collar on it. And when the fluid is at the right height, it just barely drips out. That plug goes up, and if it's too full, it runs out. So you have the car at operating temperature. You've run it through all the gears, you got it operating temperature, you remove this plug, have a drain plug, and you should get a few drops of fluid out. If you get a few drops of fluid out, it's right at the right height. But if you don't get anything out after you take the plug out, you have to pump fluid through that same hole that you removed out till the fluid comes out. I had a customer the other day who said, you charged me a half an hour labor to put in transmission fluid. How come? I mean, it doesn't take that long to put transmission fluid. I said, have you ever put fluid in your car before? He goes, no, I don't even know where it's at. I said, you don't have a dipstick? He said, I don't. I said, no, you have a plug. So I have to have a machine. I have to bring the machine over, plug it into 12 volts on the machine, put in transmission fluid in the machine, turn the machine on, and pump it into the car. Now, all that takes time. All that takes expertise to be able to do that right. But when I take a car for a test drive, and you come to a stop sign, and you take off, and the car flares because there's no fluid in it, you need to put fluid in it. So I come back, put fluid in it, everything shifts like it's supposed to. And I said, sir, if you don't want to pay me the $80, that's fine. I said, I'll just take the fluid back out, and when you tear your transmission up, you'll remember that $80 that you said you spent needlessly for the 30 minutes worth of work plus the fluid. You'll remember when you had to pay when you had to pay about $1,500 to $3,000 to replace this transmission. He goes, well, I didn't realize it was that much trouble. I said, it's not easy to put transmission fluid in some of these cars. It's like oil. if you want to check the oil on a Mercedes, or you want to check the oil on some BMWs or some Jaguars or some Land Rovers, there's no dipstick on it just to check the oil. You have to do it on your dash. That's right. You have to do it on the dash after the car is shut off. You have to do it on the dash, let the oil drain down, and it'll tell you if the oil level is okay or not okay. Honest, I don't make it up. That's how they do that. They're getting where they don't want you, the average person, looking at a car because, well, people have a tendency to add the wrong fluids, or people have a tendency to not check them right or service them correctly. So they're trying to get the backyard technician away from being able to look at their car. It's not like it used to be where you could go out and, check this and check that and check this and check that. A lot of things you can't check unless you have a scanner, like on a BMW. If I want to check the oil level, I have to do it at the dash. If I want to reset the oil light, I have to use a scanner. If I want to reconfigure things or put a new battery in on some cars, I have to use a scanner. I just can't willy-nilly put a battery in there. I can't. I'll have problems. Things won't get the right voltages, and you'll have things that just won't work. Next thing you know, you got something that the car won't start. You may have damaged a ignition relay. Weird things on Saabs and BMWs. It's nothing like people imagine. Things have really gotten more complicated in the last 10 to 15 years when it comes to just doing simple maintenance, like changing batteries. You just can't do that anymore. There's a special way of doing it. You do it wrong. If you don't do it correctly, and say you've got not even an expensive car, say a Daewoo. They haven't made Daewoos in years. They've got memory codes in there that if you disconnect the battery or and you'll lose and don't have the code, the radio won't work. And that's not just Daewoos, but Volkswagens, Hondas. I'm sure there's a few more cars out there the same way. But you've got to have codes to make them work. So you've got to keep power up on them. So when you go to change a battery on one of these cars, we have to change them hot. We have to power up everything, maintain power, and when we pull the positive cable off, we first pull the negative cable off the battery. Then we pull the positive cable off. We wrap the positive cable off up in a plastic bag or a rag or something where it can't touch and short out. Then remove the battery, put the battery back in, put the positive cable on first, then put the negative cable on last. The first one off is the negative cable, and the last one on is the negative cable. That's one of the questions they ask you on the ASE test, believe it or not. But that's the cable you take off first, is the negative cable. I see so many people who don't do that, and then they wonder why they get sparks flying when they're playing with, taking batteries off and on. I see it all the time. But that's there's certain little rules that we do, and that's one of the things we do. Make sure that we keep the battery hot at all times, or the circuits hot, where we don't lose the keep alive memory, where we won't lose your radio presets, where we won't lose the way the car knows how to idle and run when you turn the air conditioning on. So we won't lose drivability memory that this car has developed. I've had people that's one of the first signs that I know they got a bad battery is the car starts up and dies, starts up and dies, starts up and dies. Takes about 3 times, and finally, if they'll hold the RPMs up a little bit, the car it'll run and do fine. But a lot of times, you get to the first or second red light, it'll die again. They go, "What's wrong with this car?" And I go, "You're not going to believe it when I tell you this." They go, "What?" I said, "Your battery's bad." "Well, the car starts fine, it just keeps dying." Well, what's happening is when you drop it, it drops below 9 volts. When you're cranking it, and when it drops below 9 volts, the memory that it has in there, that it's learned over the years, how to make this car to idle and to run and all this, it gets wiped out. It's gone. All that memory goes away, so it has to relearn, when you drop below 9 volts. That's why it won't stay running. So your battery is bad. Change your battery, that problem will go away. I mean, there's some things out there that you wouldn't believe that, I've had people say, "I can't believe my battery's bad. It cranks over fine." I said, "Well, your battery is failing. When the car cranks, I'm showing you right here, the voltage drops down to about 8 volts. When it drops down to 8 volts, anything that it's learned is history. It has to relearn again how this car operates, how it maintains, how it idles, how it runs, how you're driving. All that has to be relearned again. So that's why there's a little bit more involved in changing batteries or even changing oil. If you don't have the right scanners, you don't have the right training to reset these things. I've had people come in all the time, "Yeah, I got an oil change done at XYZ oil change place. They only charge $19.95. And I go, sir, you're driving a 2017 direct injection car. Isn't that true? Yeah. I said, didn't you pay about $75,000 for this car? Yeah. So why are you chincing on $20 oil changes when you should have full synthetic oil in this car? I don't know. I thought that was what I was supposed to do. No, just because you're getting an oil change and you're getting the wrong oil, you're killing that car. Always use the best oil. Always use the best product available, the best filter, and your car will last you forever. Too many people get penny wise and pound foolish. When it comes to today's cars, there's no such thing as a $29.95 oil change on today's cars. If you're putting that kind of oil in your car, you're killing your car. If you've got a direct injection engine out there, and you're not running anything but full synthetic Mobil 1 or Amsoil or Red Line or any other full synthetic molecule by molecule made in a test tube oil, you're killing your car. You're not going to get that 100,000 miles or that you want, or that 200,000 miles. You'll be lucky to get the 100,000 miles. Now, don't get me wrong. There's some good oils out there that call themselves full synthetic. They're good oils, but they're not full synthetic. They'll do what they'll get. They will do okay. But if you really want to get the best bang for your buck and have a car that's going to last 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 miles engine-wise without having to do major engine work, use full synthetics. Pay the extra $30 or whatever it takes to get full synthetic. It's money in the bank. You may spend $30 now, but you're saving yourself $3,000 later. It's not me saying that. It's a lot of people a lot smarter than I am that have talked about, like the old Fram commercial from years ago, pay me now or pay me later. And when you pay later, it's usually a lot more inconvenience and time and aggravation. By doing a little bit at a time and doing preventive maintenance, going in and changing your fluids more often. Every 2 years, 30,000 miles, every fluid should be changed. That's antifreeze, that's transmission fluid, that's brake fluid, that's transmission. All these fluids in here that people, well, I only got 10,000 miles on my car. Well, you may have 10,000 miles on your car, but that fluid's still old. It's been in there 2, 3, 4 years, been exposed to the atmosphere. Oil sitting on the shelf that's never been opened only has a 2-year shelf life. What makes you think your car is so special that it can sit there in your car that's been used and it's not going to degrade, it's not going to oxidize, it's not going to cause problems sitting in your car? It's not. When your fluid is 2 years old or 30,000 miles, you really need to think about replacing it. Which comes first, 2 years or 30,000 miles? Whichever. I know a lot of people, 2 years comes a lot faster than 30,000 miles. And I know some people that can put 30,000 miles on in 15 months. So it's up to you. Like to say, pay me now or pay me later. Pay another shop. You don't have to bring it here to James Auto Center. But the point is, too many people wait till they see the light come on. Till they see the light, yeah. The light, and they're like, man, why didn't I do this faster? Or they see a puddle on the ground. Or they see a car running too hot and the gauge is pegging over. Or the oil pressure light is down to nothing and is blinking, the light's blinking. Don't wait till that. That's crisis management. Get your car looked at on a regular basis, because holidays are right around the corner. And you're going to be traveling more and more in the next few months than you've been traveling this whole summer. And when you start thinking about it, there are some cool days coming up, so you need to start thinking about getting your car ready for winter. When we come back tomorrow, we're going to talk about getting your car ready for winter. Fall is here. Kids are in school. Holidays are around the corner. Time to visit friends and family. Give us a call, 850-763-0555 for your free AAA safety inspection.